All right, everyone, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. I know there's a lot of compelling sessions on the schedule, so thanks for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. My name is Jess Zimbabwe. I'm an architect and city planner and executive director at Environmental Works. And we're here to talk about a case study of a project that we worked on with the Ethiopian Community in Seattle and Beacon Development. So we're going to hear from some of our partners there. That case study is Ethiopian Village. And let me tell you just a little bit of background about Environmental Works. We're a nonprofit community design center founded on Earth Day in 1970, to give you a sense of context of our founders. We were founded by faculty and students at the University of Washington School of Architecture and Urban Design and Planning who wanted to get the services of those professions into the hands of communities who are underserved traditionally by those professions. And we've stayed true to that mission for 54 years. And so we still work around Washington State with nonprofits in service of communities. These are some photographs from a number of projects over the 54-year history. And one of the things that we focus on is doing deep community engagement in design. We're really committed to it because we think that the end users of our projects have an expertise, have a knowledge that deserves to be included in the design. We think it's especially important to do that kind of engagement when we're working with communities that don't look like us, right? We're a white, predominant, white-led nonprofit organization. So when we're working with other communities, in the case of a community that's immigrant and refugee community, those are folks that have a different experience, that they've their lived experience, and what home means to them is something different. So this is a community that's found home programmatically with the organization of the Ethiopian Community in Seattle, and this is an instance where we're trying to build physically a home in partnership with that organization. So it was very important to us early on to engage with members of that community to get their input and expertise into the design. We have been developing this community design toolkit for a couple of years in our office. It started out of the pandemic. We, like everyone, worked from home, worked remotely when the pandemic hit. Our staff grew during that time period, and all of a sudden we found ourselves in a situation where we had staff. We also absorbed a landscape architecture firm, so we had a bunch of landscape architects with us, and they had done community engagement in their designs differently than the architects had. And all of a sudden we found ourselves in the pandemic with people who had never experienced the ways that other people on our staff had done community engagement. And so we started this toolkit to just be an internal learning tool. How can we all put all of our ideas, all of the things that we've tried, learned from, failed, succeeded at, in one place so that we can have those different strategies and pick and choose among which ones would work for future projects. So we've also started a literature review of a number of other tools from other organizations and firms that we respect a lot. And so we're writing this up as a community design toolkit, and then we said we should probably share this with the world. So that's our plan. We're going to put together this toolkit and share it with all of you and others who want to learn more about this. But that's how it started, really, selfishly, was an internal project to see how we could learn from each other and help bring our staff up to speed. So there are a number of different methodologies that are covered in the toolkit, and there's a handful of them that we used in this case study, Ethiopian Village. And those are the ones that are described here, and you're going to hear a little bit more about them. But they're visual preference, design games, group sharing, facilitation, and dot voting. And then we've got these icons that describe all the other different methods. So you'll see how we use those in the design of this project. And with that, I'm going to kick it off to Sega.
Thanks, Jess. I'm Sega Desta, Program and Housing Director at the Ethiopian Community in Seattle. I joined ECS about 5 years ago as a program manager to lead the Ethiopian Village on behalf of the community center. I've been working in the nonprofit sector for a majority of my career. I've been at the Allen Institute for Brain Science, working as a senior project coordinator. And then before that, I was working at Washington Global Health Alliance as an engagement manager. So Ethiopian Community in Seattle has been around for more than 30 years. There's a lot of volunteers and a lot of dedicated community members that we interact with. We have 8 full-time staff, and our director, Sofia Benalfo, is the one who leads the team. We have major programs on health. We have senior health, which the seniors come to the center twice a week, and they do exercise, have a meal, socialize. We also educate them about chronic disease management. We have events throughout the years. One of our major events is graduations, where we celebrate graduates from all years at the community center. In regards to education, we have kids. We just finished an Amharic class. Also during the summer, we had summer camp where about 46 students went through the program. We are also working on small business. We have a small business program through the Department of Commerce. We're part of the SBRN network. We also have an in-house small business employee who consults small businesses on how to gain capital and grow their business. We're also into advocacy. We do a lot of advocacy efforts to understand the inequities and racial barriers that our community faces. So we do that as well. So in terms of housing, we do connect members to low-income housing as well as affordable housing. So a member might come and say, how do I fill out an application to get a Section 8 voucher? So we also do that. We have a social service desk for that purpose. So in terms of housing, why Ethiopian Village? So we've seen a lot of rapid gentrification of members who can't afford to pay rent within Seattle. Especially our senior population has been affected by this. So the board and the leadership about 8 years ago decided to take on the Ethiopian Village project to find affordable housing for these seniors. We established a Ethiopian Community Steering Committee that interfaced with these members to find out their needs, to understand the problems. And Environmental Works was brought on early on as to do the design and community engagement. Beacon Development was hired as a development consultant, and we partnered with Human Good Affordable Housing as our partner, and Walsh Construction was selected as the contractor of choice. And after a total of about 8 years of fundraising and construction included, Ethiopian Village was completed in May of 2023. So some of the outcomes out of this project, we have 90 units of affordable housing for low-income seniors. Majority of them are Ethiopians and Eritreans. As you may know, we can't, because of the fair housing rule, we can't say only Ethiopians in. So we did a word of mouth and blasted that the application was being opened and helped the seniors by filling out applications. So majority of the residents are of Ethiopian and Eritrean origin. There's 49 studios and 41 bedrooms. As part of, so Ethiopian Village has 3 components. One of them is the renovation of the existing community center and expansion of the existing center, because we wanted to grow our programs and cater for more members, and I led that portion of the project. So the residents participate in the Mondays and Tuesdays senior programs. Quite a number of them come down. So it's like a village. They live there and they come down and get the resources that the community center offers. We raised $8.7 million for the renovation and expansion of the community center. All grants, no loans, and it was our first affordable housing project, and we're pretty proud about that. Any claps? So community engagement, because this is what the talk is about, is a critical piece of the success of Ethiopian Village. As you can see here, I'm going to take the example of the art that has gone on the building, a beautiful art. If you drive by in the Rainier Valley, we are on South Rose and Rainier Street, so you can see the beautiful art on the building. And the community, as I said, we've been around for more than 30 years, and the community trusts us. And we have an established relationship with them. Our outreach is community-based. We use print, messaging. For those that don't participate in social media, we do reach out directly. So we know what to say, we know what not to say. So the culture and the connection we have with the community is key in building a successful affordable housing. And when we did the art project, we gathered feedback. We created a Ethiopian Village Art Committee, which included myself, our executive director, members from the steering committee, and members from the general members. And they helped create the criteria for selecting the artist. Also came up with valuable inputs of what the art needs to look like. Ethiopia is a country with a lot of culture, and over 80 languages get spoken. Obviously, we can't have all that history on the building, but through this committee, we were able to prioritize those designs that needed to go on the building. So the committee would meet with us and then take whatever we discussed to the larger community and discuss in our monthly breakfasts, get their input. So it was an iterative process that was going back and forth to make sure that their voices are heard. So this is just a glimpse of there's 5 sets of art that went up. It's just above the Ethiopian coffee shop, and a couple of them showing on the community side of the building. So to wrap up, I just want to say that community engagement is key. It fosters ownership between the community center and the community members. They feel empowered that their voices are being heard, and it's a critical part of the process here. And with that, I'm going to hand it to Brian Lloyd, who's going to talk about Beacon's role, Human Goods Affordable role, and the funds and the juicy stuff that's involved in the building of the residential portion of the project.
Thank you, Sege. So as Sege said, I'm Brian Lloyd. I'm Vice President with Beacon Development Group. We are a development consultant for nonprofits and housing authorities in Washington. And then we also do the development for our parent company, Human Good. They're a senior affordable housing provider in up and down the West Coast. So stepping back in time to reflect on just what our role was and how we participated, both as Beacon and as Human Good. Big picture, our job was to follow the lead of ECS and try to accomplish their goals around housing and community center within the constraints of the affordable housing and funding arena, which is complicated, as all of you know. You don't get to do whatever you want, but you try to do whatever you can with the resources available. And I think we came out pretty good, wouldn't you say, Sega? So Beacon Development Group became a part of the team in 2016. ECS approached us as Beacon to be their development consultant. And there was another nonprofit involved at the time, Seed. Yeah. And for various reasons, Seed couldn't move it forward as a partner. So Beacon said to ECS, well, what about Human Good, our parent company? They've done 2 other projects in the Seattle area as partnerships with community-based organizations. And so we explored that role. So then Human Good became a part of the team. We signed an MOU between Human Good and ECS in 2018 that described the roles and responsibilities of the 2 parties. Our basic approach was to create a 50-50 partnership with each partner focusing on the areas of the process where they had particular expertise. So that meant that ECS led in terms of community design, community input, relationships with the neighborhood and with various funders. And Human Good focused on property development issues and provided the financial guarantees to support the development of the project. And compliance, Tracy Cleveland is here, our former compliance director, and she helped make sure we did everything according to rules. So a few more facts just about the project and the process. So we started in 2016. I mean, you started well before 2016. I don't even know how long that was, but it takes a long time, doesn't it? So we started in 2016. Human Good became a part of the team in 2018. We closed in 2021 and finished about 18 months later. The residential portion of the new construction was a $34 million project. The shell cost for the new expanded community center was $4 million. And then Sega gave us the figure for the total community center shell and the community center expansion. It was a 4% tax credit deal. Hudson Capital was our investor. For the finance folks who are in the room, Umpqua Bank was our bond holder, and we had City, State, Capital Magnet Fund, and dollars in the deal, and then a land loan. The site of the project is the former parking lot of the ECS Community Center. So that was a land loan to capture the value, and that will go back to ECS over time. There's a purchase option at the end of the 15-year compliance period. That's ECS's to exercise, so they can retain ownership of the project at the end of 15 years. And there are 3 condominiums. There's the community center renovation portion. There's the new expanded community center, and then there's the residential component. And the community center condos are both owned 100% by ECS. And the residential condominium, the 90 units plus amenity spaces, is owned by a partnership that is 51% Human Good Affordable Housing and 49% ECS. And that's only because investors don't like 50-50. They like someone to be ultimately in charge. And so since Human Good was responsible for all the financial guarantees and the risk, it was decided that Human Good would be the 51% partner. Okay, that's my piece. I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards if you have any.
Thanks, Brian. So I'm Shannon Rowan. I'm a project architect at Environmental Works, and I'll talk a little bit more about what the community process, the community design process looked like, and some of the methodologies that we used. Okay. So I'll do a quick walkthrough through the floor plans. So off on the right in the dark green is the existing community center. You can kind of see a faint line of where the new and the old join together. We really want it to seem like a cohesive piece. And then we have the coffee shop in the center off of the plaza, the resident lobby, and then a bunch of spaces for the community. Then on floors 2 through 5 is the residential. On the second floor, you can see we have studios and 1-bedrooms. And then lots of community spaces, laundry, a resident deck, things like that. So we had 2 formal community engagement sessions. The first one was very much a big picture visioning exercise. And so what's really important is to not come in and dictate what the community should be saying or how they should interact. So we went to one of, as Sega mentioned before, their monthly meetings with food. We wanted to make sure that we were meeting people at a time that worked for them. And then that there was childcare available. We had translators. We want to make sure that everyone knows that their voice matters and that they're heard. So the way that this facilitation process works is, just to summarize, is you're supposed to write down your top 3 ideas, and then we go around one by one through the room and you give your best ideas. You can add a check mark, you can add a question. And so by the end of the process, on all these big sheets of paper, we've been able to pull out top themes, things that are important, and important programmatic elements. Of course, there's always going to be someone that wants a swimming pool or something that's not feasible, but I think that something that I found really surprising was that despite this being very focused on seniors, there was a huge emphasis on intergenerational spaces and making sure that the kids had some place to go after school or a place to learn, or just something that's going to be for the whole community and not just the seniors. And so the second one was taking these program elements that were created through this first visioning exercise, and they became these little puzzle pieces that were blocks, and the blocks were had little money signs on them so you could know how much it cost. So for instance, if you really wanted this large meeting hall, knowing that it's going to be expensive, and if that's the case, maybe we won't have some of these other things, like a swimming pool. And they're also roughly square footage size, what they would be needed. So it was a great thing. People were in different groups. They worked together. There's sharing back and forth, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. And it really helps to create this consensus, not consensus, but a good understanding that's shared and collaborative of what this space might look like, elements that are more prioritized, and it makes people really feel a sense of ownership and like what they want to see and how they live matters. So going into the group sharing, a big part of that is where we break into groups, people share the ideas that they came up with, and then you steal one idea from another group and incorporate it into your own. And that really just helps create this shared understanding and this shared design experience instead of, well, my group got picked and then your group didn't, or why didn't my idea get listened to? So it's more of pulling out, because you'll notice groups will, oh, I liked this idea, I like that idea too, and then you're able to say, okay, we need to make sure that that stays in the design. Another method that we used was dot voting, which is really helpful, especially when you're have a community with multiple languages. This way they're able to just visually say, this is what's important to me, this is what we want to see. And so what we did is we printed out lots of pictures, whether that's Pacific Northwest, mixed use, multifamily housing, or it's native architecture and art and design from Ethiopia, and just really getting a better understanding of what's important to the community as a whole, design-wise as well. And what are going to be some of these cultural touchstones that'll be important, especially for people that are coming from another country, to really feel like they're at home in their space here. So here are some of the ones that really stood out in the visual preference survey. We've got Lalabella, we've got the Axum obelisks, we have these dome-shaped huts and basket weaving and textiles. And something that we really wanted to prioritize was how to bring this into our design, despite, having to stay in budget, having to make changes and develop and deal with things like where's the, electrical vault gonna go and all those kind of things. So here we have the final result, and I just wanted to point out a few things that really show how these things trace through the project, and we ended up being able to really represent the community's ideas. So on the right here, you can see some signage. We've got it in English and Amharic. There's textile patterns that help with wayfinding on each floor, especially when you're dealing with seniors and people that can age in place. Having the colors and textiles is really going to help with wayfinding. You can see that in this picture with the mailboxes and with this gentleman sitting on the sofa that lots of art and textiles are incorporated into the design to make people really feel welcome and at home. And then Sega talked a bit about the art, which is a great asset. I know that we were worried it wasn't going to pull through, and it's just so wonderful to see it. And something that I did want to point out in here is you can see in the brick columns, we've echoed that axum shape. We have the coffee shop that was, the TI portion was done by Grandbaba Architects, and I think they did a great job of echoing the materiality and the stone and everything that was really highlighted by the community. And just the first time we came for that first workshop, we really noticed how important coffee was and that gathering space was, and having a place for people to stop and chat after big community events or just to meet up with each other. There's sort of a traffic jam at the front door. So having this place is such a great, huge asset to the community. And something that I think is such a special part of this project is in the upper left-hand corner is the renovated meeting room space. So if you remember back to the pictures of the first community meeting, you can see there's a very low ceiling. This is the same room. We were able to open the ceiling up, expose these beautiful beams, and create this light-filled space that's just such an asset to the community. And I think that what these pictures really show is how you can have community design work as this bridge to bring together the designers, the community, the developer, to really create a space that reflects the community as a whole.
Thanks, Shannon. And with that, we'd love to open it up to conversation with you all. If you might have questions about the Ethiopian community in Seattle. What's that? There's a couple more slides, I'm sorry. Yes, sorry, this is a peek into the Community Design Toolkit, which is the product I mentioned earlier, which goes over, how many different methodologies are there, Shannon? Will you remind me? I think 3 dozen or so. I think in the 30s or the 40s, different methodologies. So 5 of those are the ones that Shannon went over that we used in this project. So, I mean, our process is different each time depending upon the community that we're working with and about the project that's being designed and where they're at in the process. But basically, it's like a kit of parts, this list of methodologies, and you would pick and choose among them. So you might choose 3 or 4 different activities to make one workshop. And so the toolkit's going to lay out descriptions of how you could put an agenda together to do a community engagement meeting like that. And then this is our contact information. We'd love to stay in touch with you after. So feel free to reach out. But also, we're here live and want to be in conversation with you. And we've got some more time. So you might have questions about the Ethiopian community in Seattle, about the Ethiopian Village project, about community engagement. Any of those are fair game, even other things. Ooh, and Shannon's going to play the role of Sally Jesse Raphael right now.
Thank you. My name is Deb Elzinga, and I'm with Community Frameworks.
Oh, great. Hey.
And my question is, like, do you have any lessons? And first, that is a beautiful project. Like, congratulations to all of you. It's really beautiful. But what lessons would you share with us if you don't know who you're going to be serving? Because I love the idea of how intentional you were and how it really translated your vision, right? But we don't always know who we're going to be serving specifically, but I love this idea.
That is a really, really good question, a really deep one. Open to anybody else's idea. I mean, I would start is that we are always trying to get to as close as possible to the end user, which I think is a little bit slightly different. I know there's a bunch of other sessions about different types of community engagement. There was another session earlier today about NIMBYism, in fact. Like, I think there's a fine line between choosing which communities you are trying to engage. And I think some of the NIMBY communities have learned that they could demand community engagement as a way to have their voices heard. So I think it's important you have to differentiate among the different possible communities you could engage, right? The community that is, especially in affordable housing, right around or right proximate to the building may not be the same community as the eventual end users. So that's what we're trying to aim for, as close as possible to the possible end users. Shannon, you want to add something?
Okay, it's working now. I'll add one more thing to that, is that I think that the power of community design is that it provides a microphone to those who have been historically silenced. Their voices have historically not been heard. And I think that what you're seeing in some of these areas where these NIMBY situations, we've dealt with it with the Plymouth Kenmore project that I think they talked about in that session, that you really want to make sure that you, as the facilitator and the in-between between the end user and the larger community, to really advocate for the community so that you can help, make sure that people that are heard enough are not talking too much, and the people that aren't heard are having their voices heard.
I think as Ethiopian community in Seattle, we are there to build the community, the East African community, and we are there to listen. For example, our next affordable housing project, we're trying to build affordable housing for multifamily. We think we're planning to have a first floor community space with childcare and early childhood center. So these ideas came from the community. We listened to the community, and it was great that we served our seniors, but there's still a lot of need for families needing more units. So we do start with the needs of the community. We listen to the community, and that's how all of our programs are being crafted.
Yeah.
So for us, it's going to be difficult without community input to start a project.
Yeah. Anything you want to add, Brian? I mean, I guess just practically speaking on engaging with the community when you don't know who they are, some techniques we've used if we're not reaching a specific community like the Ethiopian community in Seattle would be to try and find a proxy stand-in for people that are like the end users. So maybe that nonprofit developer or housing authority has another similar project serving a similar type of population a mile or two away, and going and talking to the families there about what's worked well or what hasn't worked well could give you a stand-in of that sort of end user perspective, possibly. Yeah.
Hi, when did the Ethiopian community in Seattle start building affordable housing, and how did you guys come to the decision to start doing that?
So the community has been around since 1983, but Ethiopian Village is our first affordable housing project. And it's because of the gentrification and communities being displaced that the board and the leadership about 8 years ago decided to do the first affordable housing project. And we're on to our second affordable housing project now.
More questions? Oh, we got one back here.
Hello. I was just wondering, as a partnership, when you were talking about community engagement, what was the role that you decided Beacon Development Group was going to have during the community engagement process?
Well, our role was to listen. We followed the lead of ECS in terms of engaging the community, and then Environmental Works in terms of turning that into a design. Our project manager and construction manager were participating and translating all that information into, okay, how's this going to look in a funding application?
Right.
How is this going to intersect with tax credit rules for compliance, or how is it going to intersect with property management practicalities? So we might raise a hand and say, what do you think about this ramification of that design idea, or this cost challenge of that portion of the program? But generally, we were listeners.
Yeah, I can add like 2 examples. For example, there was a time when, do we want to do shower or bathtub? So that, question will come to the community. We'll do a survey. Majority will like bathtub, and then we'll work with the Beacon group and the construction manager, and they'll do an assessment of cost and that sort of thing. Coffee, for example, people like to make coffee inside the homes. So do we want a stovetop or some other kind of design? So it was a iterative back and forth with them.
I would add another role I think that Beacon and other great developers like them play is not just listener but translator. And I mean, I guess not language translator, but sometimes modes of working translator. I don't underestimate how much work it is to be a good listener in sessions like this, but then also turn at the next meeting and talk to banks and investors and funders about why the project might take longer because we're doing this deep engagement. That's real work, and you've got a good developer partner when they'll defend that kind of part of the process too. So,
Thank you for the presentation. You'd mentioned swimming pool. Did they get the swimming pool?
No.
Okay, all right. Okay,
No,
I know it's
sorry.
tough.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, is there consideration to how close, these recreation facilities are to these developments, like the swimming pool?
I can actually answer that. So had been working on a feasibility study with East African Community Services, and they do a lot of after-school programs with kids, and they found that they just were renting and renting and renting basketball, courts and stuff like that. So in the beginning, we really tried to make it work, but I think that because of different funding structures, which I won't pretend to understand, they had to raise their own money for the community center portion, and it just couldn't pencil out. So that space we kind of had to remove a floor and do a whole thing, but a lot of it is, okay, what's nearby? Okay, well, we have this community center that's within walking distance. We can go there. Or there's a park within walking distance. So I think it's part of a bigger conversation, and we always hope to make stuff work, but funding is hard, space is hard, especially in Seattle, finding space. So we try as best we can, but unfortunately sometimes we have to make use of other community resources. Sega, you had something to add?
Yeah, the community wanted, for example, like a coffee shop hut, I think in one of the diagrams, like in between the residential building, there was a coffee shop, and, they envisioned themselves doing the traditional coffee, and we had to take that out because of funding, and that was painful, but at the end, they knew, like, we had to balance the cost, so, yeah. No, they did not get the swimming pool.
So raising money to build affordable housing is very, very difficult, very challenging, right? There's not nearly enough. But you know what's even harder? Raising money for non-residential spaces. So the fact that you raised $8.7 million for the community renovation and the community space expansion is astounding, because that money is very difficult to raise. And it goes to show how much influence the community has and how much recognition there is that is an important part of Seattle and our King County region. A couple up here, Shannon.
Danny. So for those of you who weren't able to attend the CBO capacity building for developer session earlier, I'd just love, Sega, if you could speak to how you all made that leap from housing provider to developer.
I think, like I mentioned, it's the displacement of communities that started the journey. And then there were critical board members who had relationships with representatives. So out of the 8.7 million, half came from the state. So these representatives championed for senior housing and against displacement. So that's, I think, the key there. And the City of Seattle EDI, critical funder as well, they really helped us pick up all the gaps. For example, there was a 4-month delay due to concrete strike, which we did not see. We had contingencies, but so they were able to step up and cover the difference. So I think those critical board members had a vision, and the representatives were key in letting us start the journey.
For those of you that are Seattle voters, the acronym SIGA's used, the Equitable Development Initiative, is a critical commitment that the city of Seattle has made to communities under some threat as of recent. So voice your support for it.
Sega, to clarify, how did you proceed with implementation having never been in development? So you started with funding, you had a vision, you secured funding, but how did you do it? How did you know where to go? How did you know to connect with Beacon or Human Good, Environmental Works? How did you all proceed?
I think the board members, again, were critical in approaching Beacon to start that relationship. When I started, I don't have any construction background, but I had a project management background. And it was like being inserted in the project. Environmental works played, so they did the architecture for both the residential and the community space. And I think that they really helped to, we didn't have a construction manager on the ECS side. And environmental works had two hats. So they did architecture as well as they were our construction manager, which really helped me in answering a lot of questions about, I'll be like, I don't understand this, can you translate? So Roger would translate that, and I think that helped a lot. Also, there were private foundation funds, which helped with capacity building for us as well, which helped with a lot of my time being paid through the private grant. So a lot of learning and a lot of connections that the board members had. And of course, our executive director had as well, Sophia.
Thank you, Shannon, for doing the microphone running.
I'm curious, for the engagement that you did, are there components of the housing that are going to be carried forward to future projects, either on the developer side or the CBO side? And if yes, kind of what questions that you asked the community yielded those results?
So we do have a monthly breakfast sessions where we present to the community all our programs. And through that channel where one of the channels where we hear, this is great, the seniors are good. Of course, that's also like scratching the surface. There's a lot of housing problems still. And that's where they come and provide us with this feedback. Our social service manager also, who does the helping members fill out applications for Section 8, connecting them to low-income housing. She's also the ears to the community, because she says, a lot of people have been asking about this, and a lot of, this month I've been doing a lot of service on the side of, filling out applications for this and that. So I guess being in tune with the community and listening to them is what we do. Our second project is across the street from Ethiopian Village. We are going, we just got a direct, but about a few months ago, got a direct appropriation to purchase the land. We also got a pre-development funding that we just got approved last week. So that is gonna go into the community engagement piece again, part of it, to listen and to do surveys and say, okay, a while back you told us child care center and early childhood center, so what else is out there? How can we be more flexible? So we're going to use part of that funding to go out into the community again and talk to them. But if we are successful with the second affordable housing project, it's going to be complementary to the existing Ethiopian Village, where programs are going to be shared. So the land is not that big, so we're limited with space. So one of the things that we're thinking about is for the other programs, they can just walk to the Ethiopian Village and do XYZ, or whatever housing in the senior housing portion is being implemented, we can share those resources. So it's very early, but we're thinking about that.
I think a couple of examples I can think of specifically, Shannon will have to remind me the details, but that we learned as architects are one about the laundry room. There was a strong desire for the laundry room to be a community space. And that's an idea that we've carried through in other senior housing projects, is that's a space where people are on their daily needs, and if it can be a communal space for chatting while you're doing the laundry, that's helpful. So that's another idea we heard in that community engagement, have carried into other senior housing projects. And then one that was very specific, and I'm gonna forget the name of the kettle that fits in the tall cabinet.
Oh yeah, I remember this one, and I remember this conversation that we had. And so just to jump back to something that Sega said, in order to make space for ECS to ask as many questions as they could, we had a separate meeting on Friday mornings with Sophia and Sega and one of their other community members, Elizabeth. But I remember coming up with the thing that you wanted to make sure that the cabinets were tall enough to fit the coffee pot, and not to get rid of certain cabinets or all the upper cabinets, because I think that there's always this push and pull between budget and the things that the community has asked for. And I know that having these notes from the community engagement sessions makes it be like, no, this is important. Or the notes from meetings with Sega to say, no, we have to keep this in.
Right.
Regarding that community engagement budget, or the ongoing community engagement, I was just wondering if you, what the budget was, what the staff of requirement was, and you said that you have monthly meetings, and then you also mentioned surveys, and I was just wondering what other forms of engagement were you doing, and if you could go back and do that first development again, what would you do differently, or what did you learn?
I think we have social media as well, where through Facebook and the usual Instagram and all those modules that we have further developed since 8 years ago. So we are trying to use that as well. And there's a lot of messaging apps that immigrants use, such as Viber, Telegram. So we've started expanding into that space. People are on their phones a lot, so trying to capitalize on that messaging platform is what we plan to do. And the monthly breakfasts they've been ongoing since years and years ago, even before I started there. So they're going to continue as a main channel of listening to community members. So I think this time around is expanding on the messaging apps that we plan to do.
Any last questions? One more.
How much do the residents pay in rent?
Brian might know those numbers off the top of his
I
head.
don't know if I have all those numbers, but what I can say is that 25% of the units are rented to people at 30% of area median income, 50% at 50% of area median, and 25% at 60% of area median. So I would say the rents range from maybe 500-ish, 600-ish. I wish it were 500-ish. Maybe it was at one time, but 600-ish to about 1,000. 1,200. See, I'm very optimistic about these things.
Are all the units full right now?
If not quite full, pretty close to full. There is a fair amount of turnover in this building. I wish that weren't the case, but two of the things that we were pushed to do that I would not do again, if I could, is I would do more one-bedrooms and fewer studios, but we were in a housing crisis and funders wanted as many units as possible, but I would push back harder on that in the future. And then, nobody's fault, but just parking there is not parking for residents of the housing, and that's a big barrier. So some folks move in, they stay for a year, but then they move out. So there's a bit of turnover. So to answer your question, it's generally full, but there's turnover happening. So at any one time, there might be 90 to 95% occupancy. But it has been leased up for, a year and a half now?
What is the criteria for somebody to come live there?
Well, people have to have a senior in the household. So it can be a 1 or 2 person household. Someone has to be 55 or older. And then they have to meet the income criteria. And then there are other general background check stuff, not criminal background check, because that's not allowed in Seattle, but predator issues. What am I doing? You tell me. Rental history and certain law infractions.
So what percentage of units are family-sized units?
None. It's all seniors. So it's exclusively for senior population.
It's just studios and one-bedrooms.
No 2 bedrooms
No.
and above. Okay.
This is
got
just
it.
for seniors, yeah.
Okay, got it.
But to be clear, we work on lots of family-sized units in areas where there's maybe a little more space to spread out. So we're currently working on a redevelopment of the Bryant Manor site, which is right next to Pratt Park in the Central District, and it's all family-size units. 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, 2-bedroom. We don't have any studios in it, and there's lots of outdoor space, community space. So I think that while they didn't have the space to do that, or maybe the funding to do that, we try to make sure that there are other projects that we're connecting with that are combating gentrification and displacement in family-size units.
Is there anything you would have done differently in this process if it were geared towards home ownership instead of the rental market with regards to community engagement?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head that would change homeownership. What would you say, Sega?
So for our second project, we're in the process of trying to decide whether to go homeownership or rental. So again, those surveys and those communications with the community are gonna come in. But first we have to determine if it pencils in. With my limited understanding, there's limited resources for homeownership. After the home is done, there's a lot of resources, but through the process, there isn't. So it has to pencil. So I'm part of the HEA Home Equity Accelerator Group, and that's where the technical assistance comes in, and that's where they're helping us figure out the best way for our new project.
Anyone else?
Can you clarify by what you meant by there are limited resources for homeownership? I forget what you said at the beginning.
It's my understanding, like there's construction loan that you can take and maybe a few resources from Office of Housing, but not as much resources, but I
Yeah,
differ.
so if you think about the funds that the City Office of Housing has to distribute, the bulk of those go toward rental. And I don't know, maybe 10 or 15% might go toward home ownership. I wish we had more money and everyone got more, but the idea being that the most needy population are the lowest income, and rental housing will be most accessible for them at a reasonable price point.
Yeah, I was talking to someone who attended the BHI session, and they were saying maybe from the community reinvestment project, more funds will be coming towards homeownership.
There we go. Community engagement can be done with homeownership. We've partnered with Opal Community Land Trust on the Orcas Island, and we really try to make sure we're appealing to the community and reflecting the vernacular architecture of Orcas Island and making it something that's accessible for them.
But now I'm having a real honest conversation with you, my colleague Shannon.
Yeah.
Did we change our engagement? I don't think we do. I'm trying to get in philosophical with you.
I think on the Orcas project, we went to like the farmer's market and had a booth. But if you find Jess Blanche around here, she can weigh in on that. Maybe change it slightly, but I think that because that's a less populated area, you don't have the same sort of like monthly meetings and stuff existing.
More of a rural than urban versus distinction than the ownership model versus rental,
But I do think in that situation is where you have to be careful of NIMBYs and things like that.
Hi, my name is Jeannie Williams, and I'm from Skyway Coalition in the south end of Seattle. And we are currently doing a CLT project for the community, and we are trying to seek out community engagement and ways to do that. Just listening here today, it sounds like the Ethiopian community of this project already had a gathering kind of way of doing things with the monthly meetings and so forth. But for our project, we've really been trying to focus in on not only how to do community engagement, but then also how to figure out how to make sure that it's very specific. Homeowners that have lived there for a long time that might get pushed out, that have a history of being there in Skyway. How do we prioritize that?
Yeah.
And how do we make sure that those are the people that we're getting the feedback from? But if you don't already have a way of organizing that, then you really have to then stand up and try to figure out how do you reach each of those populations and how do you pull them in and how do you get that information. So I'm not really sure. I mean, I guess anybody on the panel can speak to that, but
you're asking all the right questions. Like, you're exactly on the right track. And
but
I mean, the only advice I can offer, just happy to talk more in detail later, but sometimes in situations where there isn't already a monthly breakfast meeting, you have to sort of create the event to bring people there, right? So we're doing some work with the Rainier Beach Action Coalition on Henderson Street, some work in South Park, where it's about sort of glomming on to other community events and having a table there, or inventing, a Boo Bash event where everybody's gonna bring their kids for a trunk or treat. And then, by the way, there's a table over here in the side where we can talk about this project with the adults while they're dropping their kids off for the trunk or treat kind of activity. So those kind of events, you're on the exact right track.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was, you know, trying to gather more information about those other ways of community engagement and targeting groups of people that don't think they have a voice.
Yeah, you've got great instincts on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just beat me to it. I was just going to say that. I know that in Rainier Beach they do, some other nonprofit does a back to school thing where you get a backpack filled with school supplies. And so they kind of tag on to that. I know that I think one of our clients in the past posted stuff in South Seattle Emerald because that reaches a certain population, or going to different like church newsletters, things like that, where you know that who you're targeting, that's the channels that they read, the things that they go to. I know in some of our Eastern Washington projects, they were trying to lease up, and they got the Spanish-speaking radio station to come and talk about it and interview them. And so it's just kind of trying to figure out how to go to where the people you want and make sure that you're kind of not weeding out, but not broadcasting too wide of a net.
I think we're right on time, actually. Thank you all. And again, we're all happy to stay around here if you have individual questions. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, you all.